Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, following a very long hiatus from reviewing board games. Excited to be back. This is my first review following probably about 2 years off from reviewing. And today we're going to be taking a look at a heavy game. We're going to take a look at Lisboa from Vital Lacerda and Eagle Gryphon Games. This is a game about rebuilding the city of Lisboa in Portugal following a really unlucky period of time for them where they had a tsunami, an earthquake, and a fire all in a very short period of time. The game is heavy, relatively complex, but comes down to a pretty simple rule set. However, everything is nicely outlined for you in this Chinese takeout menu that everyone gets. So this relatively large booklet contains all of the information that a player will need to know in order to play the game. So real quick, why don't we take a look at how that game plays? We won't really take a look at this again, but know that it's there. We'll take a look at how the game plays, we'll see what you need to do to win, and then we'll come back at the end and we'll get my opinions on Lisboa. So here you can see Lisboa all set up for a 3-player game. Now in this game, each player represents a noble who is going to be influencing several key members of the kind of royalty slash nobility here in order to rebuild the city of Portugal, which is mostly on this side of the board, following an earthquake, a tsunami, and a fire that all happened in a very short period of time. Now, in order to do this, players are going to be playing cards out to either their own tableau, which you'll see right here, or they're going to be playing them out here in this general area in order to influence these noblemen, the builder, the minister, and the king. Now, on their player board, each player is going to start with one of each of the goods in the game: a gold, a book, a cloth, and a tool. They're going to start with an area for placing their rubble cubes, as well as a favor, which will allow them to follow play of other players in the game, so kind of piggyback off of their actions. And then you're going to see that they have a clergy tile, which is some type of benefit to them in the game. This player may use money as if it were influence. More on that later. Their own buildings that they'll build as they reconstruct shops out in the market district here in Lisboa. And then their own guys that they can use to influence these nobles out on the board, increasing the cost for other players to take those actions, and also giving them the ability to build public shops later in the game. Now, the central mechanism behind Lisboa is a play a card, take a card mechanism, so it's very simple in that aspect. However, as Vital likes to do in his games, the underlying complexity of the game comes in the smaller portions of those actions that you take by playing the cards. Now, in this game, there are 2 ways to play cards. One is to tuck them underneath your tableau, and there are areas above and below your tableau for tucking cards. At the beginning of the game, you can only have 2 cards tucked, but as you clear more and more rubble, one of each type, you'll open up the ability to hold more cards. Now, when you tuck a card, for example, this treasury card here, you'll get whatever you cover up from tucking it. So these always tuck on the bottom, like this, and when you do so, you're going to earn money based on where the current treasury value is. So, for example, I'd earn 3 money, and then this would decrease, all written on the card. Alternately, you can tuck noble cards, and you'll see a noble card looks much like this. These always tuck from the top. So when you tuck one, it will tuck here, and you'll get whatever benefit is printed on the bottom of the card. In this case, you would get a decree, which is a victory point condition for the end of the game. Now, the treasury cards, when you tuck them, also have a visible benefit that maintains visibility on the bottom of the card. So you'll see when I've tucked this one here, it's also going to decrease the cost of things but for what I pay by $1 for the rest of the game, or until I remove it. So, why am I tucking these cards? Well, in the game, there are 2 ways to play cards: tucking them or playing them out here. Anytime I tuck a card, it's going to enable one of 2 actions. Those 2 actions being selling goods, and if I've generated goods or I'm holding on to goods and someone has built a ship with open spots on it, I may sell my goods to their ship or my own ships in order to get money based on the current market value of the goods indicated over here. Additionally, when I sell and complete a ship, it will sail away, so if all of the spots are full, and that player will get 1 victory point per good that's on that ship. And there are various ships that you can build and upgrade to throughout the game, which provide you, either more spots or more money in order to sell those goods and make them more valuable as their prices decrease throughout the game. The other way that you can use a tucked card, so for example, if I tuck the minister here, is that I may now trade with the nobles, and trading with the nobles will enable these actions you see on the board here in the little banners. Each one of these actions will have a cost associated with it, and that cost is in some type of resource. So for example, the builder wants either tools or gold. The minister wants books or gold, and the king wants cloth or gold. And in order to take any one of these 6 different actions, you must pay an appropriate resource to that person. So for example, in order to use the builder's actions, I could put a resource here and put 2 of my guys out onto the board. These are useful for increasing the cost of taking different actions later for the other players, or for building public buildings, which we'll talk about here in a moment. The second action you can take with the builder is that you may get a plan, and these plans are little tiles over here that say that once you've accomplished some type of objective, in this case it's that you need 2 guys out in the area here that you may pull off, you can use those guys to build a public building, which are these buildings over here. More on those in a few. For the minister, you can spend books or gold in order to, 1, buy a ship. Ships can be bought for the number of resources in terms of the types of cargo they hold. So for example, this holds 1 cargo, you must spend 1 resource. Later ships hold 2 cargo, so you must have 2 different resources, or 3 or 4 different resources for the bigger ships you would like to build. You can also upgrade ships, only paying the difference. His other action is to produce goods, and as the game progresses, you will build buildings in the various rows here. You'll see gold, pink, brown, and blue, and those correspond with the different types of resources you have in the game. So gold, books, cloth, or tools. And as you produce these buildings, or build these buildings, you'll have more production available, 1 per shop that you have in the game. There are abilities as you build more buildings that will improve the number of resources that you're able to make, but as you produce resources, their value will decrease. So the more of something that's made, the less valuable they become in the game, eventually bottoming out at a value of 1. The king has actions available for cloth or gold, and those are to take a cleric action, moving this cleric along this path 1 or 2 steps, and taking one of these tiles associated with it. Some of these tiles will increase the value of goods, some of them will change some of the rules for you in the game, and some of them may even change endgame scoring here, like this one, so you have different things to look at as you progress along this track. Additionally, if this cleric moves 1 more step to this spot here, he will increase the market, tucking those treasury cards more valuable, and decreasing the amount of influence you must take or use to take actions later. When this cleric steps all the way around to this influence spot, there's what's called a clergy scoring, and you may discard some of these tiles that you've acquired for the number of victory points shown on the back, or wigs, and when you do so, you will also be able to score influence depicted on the top of your cards here. So you'll see this card has 1 influence. If I were to discard this tile, come a clergy scoring, I would gain 1 influence, which will be used for later actions. The second action available for trading with the king is going to be to take a favor tile, and that's these tiles here. Each player may hold 1 of each favor tile for 1 of each of the nobles, and these tiles will be able to be discarded when other players take actions by playing cards out here in order to follow that action and get some benefit. And that takes us to that portion of the game, playing cards out here. So, as I was showing you earlier, you have a hand of cards. You have 5 of them to start the game. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these cards give you different types of actions. So right now we can see this one has the minister on it. This one has the builder. I don't have a king card, but I do have 2 treasury cards that I can play. And so each of these cards can be played out here in order for a different benefit. So, for example, a builder can be played out here. And when you play a card, you must pay influence equal to the number of non-own or non-self workers here. So for example, in this case there are none, so the cost would be 0 influence. But if I were playing a minister, the cost would be 2 influence for me because this one is mine, while these 2 are not. When I do this, I get one of the minor actions I discussed before for whatever minister or noble, whatever noble I've played, but I also get this large action, and this large action is something you can really only do this way or by playing treasury cards. The first of these large actions is building. In order to build, what you must first do is pick a location out in this grid of the marketplace of Lisboa where you'd like to build. And so all of these spaces are available, and there is 1 orange, 1 pink, 1 brown, and 1 blue shop available per turn, per player turn. When you pick one of these, you're picking, for example, the color you'd like to build, and you may build that on any of the spots that are adjacent to that row. So something, or column, I should say, something like this. Picking this gives you several things. 1, it's going to tell you the cost of building that building. And the cost is determined by the rubble cubes that are adjacent to that row, to that spot in the row and column. So for example, if I were to pick this spot here, it has 2 red there, and it has a red there, and then 3 blue. Each red costs 2 coins, so that's 3 red. So 3 red is 6, and then we have 3 blue is going to be $9, plus the value of the market, which starts the game at 3. So it would cost me $12 to build on this space. Placing this tile here, depending on which way I orient this notch, is going to tell you whether it's a pink or an orange building. And also, when I cover this space, I'm going to get some type of benefit. It could be a resource, for example, a cloth or a book or a tool. It could be a plan. It could be $5 or a step on the clergy track, or it could even be rubble cubes that I get to clear out here. However, before I do any of my paying, what I'm going to do is I am going to first take a cube from one of these rows. So I can, for example, take this red cube. Now, instead of $12, my cost is $10. I place this cube onto my board. I get the action associated with where I place, so I get to take one of these extra cubes if I would like. Maybe I'll take a blue one. And I pay the cost associated to the bank. Now later, when I build public buildings, if the public buildings show the color of my building and line up with the row or column of that building, I may score points for them. Now this would have had to be a yellow building since I took the yellow one from over here, but I could have very easily just grabbed the pink one instead and done it that way. So now that's building, and those buildings will allow you to produce goods earlier, and when you do so, you're going to, not when you produce, but when you build, you're going to take one of these little houses off of your tracks in order to show that this is your building and to which side it's built. These buildings, as you take them off, will provide you with in-game benefits that improve some of the actions that you're able to take. The Minister's special ability is that he's going to let you take decrees, and you can see a whole row of decrees over here. When you take a decree, you're essentially taking an endgame victory condition. It could be for each different color building you have in row C, or for each building of your own that's in row C, or having the most cloth at the end of the game, or having each gold you have at the end of the game is worth a point. These are many and varied. And so when you take this action, you're going to take one of those cards. Now, if you've completed a full set of rubble cubes, a red, a white, and a blue, you're able to discard one of these cubes from your tableau, which will be sitting out on the Minister, increasing your ability to hold goods, increasing your ability to tuck more cards, and also giving you the ability to discard this cube to take a secondary card each time that you do this, as long as you have a cube available here. So you can get more endgame victory conditions faster. Now, the third type of noble card you can play here is the King, and the King's special ability is he lets you build public buildings. We already discussed the plans that you get earlier and the requirements for removing guys from the tableau out here in order to build those public buildings. So this one here says, if I remove 3 guys while taking a public building action, I am able to build a blue public building because of the blue color on this tile. So that would allow me to build the current blue public building should I have 3 guys out here that I'm willing to pull off and put back onto my tableau. And this building here says that it can be built in a public building space, and when it's built, all of the gold and blue that line up with this public building will score points. So, for example, let's say that this had been built as a gold instead, and I built this right here. Well, right here. First, I'm going to take all of the cubes from that space, I'm going to add them to my board, my tableau. So you'll see that I now have 3 reds and a blue. Second, I'm going to look and see in this column who has either blue or gold buildings. Well, all of them in this column will be gold. So I'm going to look and see this is a gold building. It's going to score 3 points because the 3 wigs is underneath it. And anybody else that had these in here would also score. Additionally, for placing this, I'm going to get a gold because I placed over one of the little places on the board. So I get a gold for putting that building there, adding that to my own tableau. Now, after I've played my card and done my actions, other players may follow if they have the correct favor. So if I had played the builder here and somebody happened to have a builder favor on their tableau, they can discard that, pay whatever the current influence cost is, minus whatever the market adjustment to that is, and they can follow taking an action as well. Now, instead of getting a minor and the major action, they only get one of these actions, so they don't get both. They get to choose which one of these 3 they use, typically taking the largest, most difficult to take action, such as building, decrees, or public buildings. Now, this is a way for them to get actions off of their turn, and the more you can manipulate this, of course, the better you're going to do in the game, in my opinion. Now, the way to avoid this is that you can play treasury cards out to the board as well. So instead of choosing a noble, you may play a treasury card. Playing a treasury card does not cost influence on this track. So as I said, you usually decrease your influence on this track in order to take your actions by playing cards out here. Instead of doing that in this case, you're going to pay money based on what the current market value is. So right now 3, but as the game goes up, it may go down. The cost of playing cards can adjust pretty heavily. Now when you play these, you'll see there's an action associated with playing these cards in the middle. This one is the public building space, so now I can pay money to take that action rather than influence. In doing things this way, other players are not allowed to follow me because they are not allowed to use the favor with one of the nobles in order to take that action. Now the game will progress on with you playing a card, either tucking it or playing it out here, taking your associated actions, allowing people to follow if you have influenced the nobles by playing a card, and then drawing a card from one of these 4 piles out here. You always draw a card at the end of your turn, allowing you to choose between the builder, the minister, the king, or a treasury card. And these piles all contain the same types of cards within them. You're going to continue doing this until either 3 of these piles are gone, or somebody has collected 2 different sets of 3 rubble cubes. So a red, a white, and a blue times 2 on their tableau. When you do this, you'll go into an intermittent scoring, and you're going to score 3 points for each one of your 3 sets of cubes. And then you're going to discard cards from your hand, and you're discarding cards. You may get benefits as you do so. So you can discard up to 5, so all of your cards from your hand, and for each different noble you discard, so 1 each of a builder, a minister, and a king, you can automatically get the benefit at the bottom of their card that you would get for tucking them underneath your tableau. So it's good to have a kind of backup of cards in your hand. This one will allow me to get a plan. Maybe I have this guy right here. I discard him and he lets me get a book, and I also have this king, and when I discard him, he lets me get one of the decrees off of the board for endgame scoring. You then draw back up to 5 cards from the purple deck, which is the next deck in the game, and you reseed this board here, which will have fewer cards on it by the time you're there, with the brown cards. And these brown cards, again, have their own piles. So for example, here's the builder pile, and each other noble has their own pile, as well as the treasury cards. You do this, and you continue playing in the same manner until somebody either gets 4 sets of rubble cubes or another 3 of these piles are gone. And then at the end of the game, there's a pretty extensive scoring. You get points for the size of your ships, the number of sets of rubble cubes you have, majorities of each of the different types of buildings that have been built, so colors. For every $5, you get a point. You score at each of your endgame victory conditions. You score whoever has used the most of their people in building public buildings, and each leftover favor is worth 2 points, and whoever has the most points is going to be the winner. And there you have it. That is Lisboa from Eagle Gryphon Games and Vital Lacerda. Now, I don't think it's any secret beforehand that Vital is a favorite designer of mine. I've loved everything from CO2 to Gallerists to, just on and on and on. He's got a lot of great games, Vinos in particular. Now, this game has been criticized as being a little bit hard to learn and hard to follow, as is common with a lot of his games. I actually had a bit of a different experience, predominantly because in the case of this game, it makes sense to me why particular actions lead to certain things. For example, you need to clear rubble out of the way before building your buildings, and clearing rubble before building a shop lowers the price of the cost of building directly, and also is going to give you benefits because you're helping as a public figure clean up the city. So, a lot of those things where things kind of make sense and meld together helped me to learn the progress of this game. Now, the game itself is excellent. Probably my favorite of his games so far, if not the heaviest, at least the one that I've had the most play of, especially recently. So we've played a couple of times at 2, a couple of times at 3, and a couple of times at 4. And the game scales very well from 2 to 4, so from the minimum to the maximum player number. Now, it's a little bit more dynamic at 4 than it is at 2, in particular when it comes to that following aspect of the game, where each player has those favors that they're able to spend in order to follow the action of influencing a noble by the play of a card directly to the player or to the board of the game. And this is a mechanism that reminded me very much so of Glory to Rome, if you've played that. Unfortunately, very out of print, but an excellent game where if you have the right cards either in your tableau or otherwise, you can follow an action by playing a particular card. And so this was a very reminiscent portion of that that I really like. And the game at the higher player numbers really utilizes this quite a bit. A lot of the game in those aspects is spent trying to manipulate either the actions you're taking or the benefits you're getting so that either other players can't follow you, or following you wouldn't be as beneficial as it is, of course, to taking the main action. And so that happens a lot more in a 4-player game, whereas in a 2-player game, it's a lot more of a just kind of a quick back and forth, and there's a lot less following because there's a lot less opportunity to follow. Now, the board does scale down for 2 players and then back up for 4 players, but overall I'd say better at 4 than at 2, and I think my wife, who is filming, agrees with me. So overall, though, this is an excellent game. I think it takes a lot of different aspects, from the kind of area control to the variable victory conditions, or not victory conditions, but victory point gaining conditions, that will modify the way that you play from one game to the next. So if heavy and variable and a little bit of screwage in terms of players paying attention to what actions aren't good for you, taking cards that are good for you, or simply building in areas that you would want to build in because they don't want you to get a benefit. If that all sounds good to you, definitely check this one out. It's Lisboa from Eagle Gryphon Games.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.